So, good evening and good morning. Welcome to this session number 65 of the CREI talks. Today's topic is more a synthesis of what the previous 64 talks have been. So, it is titled What the 64 talks, CREI talks tell us about the emerging trends in engineering, education, and practice. For those of you who have joined new, CREI is a forum that started about 2-3 years ago by Sub and Sham and myself joining in early January 2023. Since then, we have been doing a series of webinars covering different aspects of engineering, innovation, and so on, with speakers coming from different parts of the world. And somewhere we thought it might be a good attempt to make sense of what these talks are essentially suggesting or pointing to in terms of where engineering practice or education is heading. And an earlier version of this talk we had given at the ISED 2025 Design Theory Special Interest Group session. But since then, we have had another 18 talks. So what we are presenting is a little more detailed analysis of the patterns emerging from these talks. So with that background, let me move forward. So this is the CREI website, which hosts all these talks which have been organized till date. And the broad intention of CREI, it's an informal organization. The intention is to bring together different stakeholders associated with engineering and design to really look at what is engineering, what is innovation, and what is really relevant for countries like India. While the topics themselves are not restricted to India, but a greater emphasis or the larger number of speakers have been from India. And combined with some of the global trends that we have also seen in the engineering and design space. So since January 2023, we have had about 64 talks till date. Because this is also a curated platform, so the talks are also influenced by whom we have invited. So which also means that certain types of talks are given greater preference compared to certain other types of talks. So if you look at the areas or where we have placed greater emphasis is on looking at interdisciplinary approaches, wherever there has been case of theory and practice and implementation synergies, more focus on the real world problems, greater focus on learning by doing and iterative development and so on, linkages with the social and ecological or sustainable elements, and also India's aspirations in this overall growing global scenario. So that has been the kind of focus we have had while inviting different speakers. So at the same time, these talks don't emphasize certain aspects, like for example, it is not a detailed discussion on certain discipline-specific technical developments. We don't have many talks which are only pure theoretical abstractions or looking at optimization areas within existing paradigms and so on. And also a general view towards creativity or collective intelligence has been giving emphasis on the collective aspect as opposed to individual creativity or individual expertise. So this is what is the nature of talk. So whatever interpretations that we are going to derive is subject to this kind of content. So we don't want to generalize beyond that. So we also want to set the context in terms of what this content is and what it is not. So this is a snapshot of the 64 talks that we had. The diversity in terms of the geographic diversity, institutional diversity, and also kind of the topic or the disciplinary diversity. This is a slide captures the snapshot of various talks we have had. In terms of geography, we have had majority representations, about 40% of the talks coming from an Indian context or more. And then we have had a number of talks from Europe and US, a couple of talks from the Middle East as well. but we are yet to cover the avenues like or geographies like China, Japan, South Korea, and Australia, and Latin America, largely because of the time zone constraints at this point of time. But we are also looking at ways to bring perspectives from these locations in the future as we go into the next couple of years. In terms of the institutional diversity, we have a mix of talks, almost a majority, 60-70% is from academia and university perspective. But there are also industry specific and public sector, and even a few talks from non-governmental organizations or non-profit organizations. Institutions, illustrative institutions that have participated in this talks include some of the IITs, IIITs, NITs in India, and also premier institutions like TU Delft and TU Dresden, Mainz, Paris, Chalmers, and MIT, CMU, Yale, and so on, and even Tel Aviv. Industry representations we have had from Mahindra and Mahindra, Bosch, ICF, BARC, SCL Chandigarh, then the ADA group, which has developed the Tejas aircraft, and so on, and also Indian Railways and DRDO, and quite a few like this are represented in these talks. From a discipline wise, there is a greater focus on engineering design and systems engineering type of talks, followed by technology and manufacturing ecosystem development, education and learning, innovation and entrepreneurship, and social society, policy and institutions, and sustainability. So this is the spectrum of the 64 talks that we have had. So what we did was to start asking questions on how can we make sense of this diversity of talks? What are they really telling? What are the recurring themes that are coming across these various talks from apparently different geographies and domains and institutions? Uh, a key question has been whether these conversations are pointing to some shift in the way we're looking at engineering. And also, we try to compare whether this interpretation emerging from the CREI talks, how does it compare with the well-established models like ABET or MIT-inspired approaches like CDIO or the MIT's model of future of engineering education and so on. So this is what is the intent and behind this analysis that we did and what we are going to present today. So the framework we had followed was at three levels. One was to primarily look at the titles and abstracts. We didn't look at the detailed transcripts of each of the talks, although because some of us participated in these talks, we were aware of some of the content and used that information while refining this models and so on. Second was to we also looked at from the geographic and institutional perspective, are there any perspectives coming from Europe or USA or India? How do they differ and so on? But third, more important thing, what we had done was to take each of these talks, the titles and abstracts, and identified certain themes which cut across all these talks. So we ended up with about, after multiple iterations, we ended up with about 8 themes. And then what we did was to map all these talks to these 8 themes and then create a matrix of these 8 themes based on, for example, if a talk had touched upon theme 1 and 2, then potentially there is a relationship between 1 and 2. If a talk had touched upon themes like 1, 5, and 6, then maybe there is a linkage between how people are looking at the connections between 1, 5, and 6. So this way we try to create a matrix out of these themes and then interpreted that matrix. So this is what we attempted, and we took help of the AI tools and also the network analysis tools like Jeffy and others in synthesizing this information. And I also want to point out how one should read these insights so that, because CREI as a platform is primarily for triggering debate and discussion on this. We are not presenting a definitive single viewpoint on what the future is going to be, but we are essentially seeing what is emerging and bringing out these perspectives. So one of the things is to say that it is still interpretive, it is not absolute what we are saying here. Second is we are more interested in the patterns that are emerging from this. Third is a greater focus on how different, like localized patterns or situated and evolving patterns are visible in different talks. And also we emphasize plurality here. We're not looking at one single view of the world and so on, so on. So this is the kind of context I want to set in terms of the background material, the course, the nature of the talks, and the kind of analysis we have done. We have also been careful not to impose too much of our own perspectives, but at the same time, there will be an element of our perspectives coming into some of these interpretations. So we want the audience to understand some of these potential biases which exist in the way this content is being analyzed. So the first thing was when we looked at essentially just the keywords or the titles and abstracts, what we noticed was there was two sets of words. One is referring to the nouns and the other one referring to the verbs. And there is quite a distinct flavor of the verbs in many of these talks, suggesting that engineering and designing is better seen as a verb, which is trying to bring a more a process-centric view as opposed to a dominant object-centric view. Because technically, much of our discussions around engineering are largely centered around the object or the product or the tools, right? And what may be surfacing from these talks is that there is also speakers urging for a perspective which is paying greater attention to the process and seeing engineering and design as a process and more as a verb. So this is one subtle shift that we can see, or a pattern that we can see in some of the talks included in this particular CREI portfolio, which is very important, especially for today's context, because today we are looking at a world undergoing a lot of uncertainty, ambiguity, and change and complexity, which also means that the structures which were built up at some point of time may need to adapt and change. And one way to look at is the underlying processes and what these processes might suggest. And therefore, the potential for structures to change also may emerge by paying attention to the process. So that is also one deeper interpretation that one can derive from data like this. Now, the second thing we also looked at was the broad geographical institutional patterns. So we could see patterns like this. One is if you look at the European speakers' talks, they largely emphasized design methodology, systems integration, sustainability, and educational transformation. So this was the kind of pattern in the talks given by the European speakers. Whereas in the American speakers' talks, folks focus more on design methods, innovation methods, experimentation, AI, cognition, and interdisciplinary integration. Industrial practitioners emphasize real-world complexity, organizational negotiation, and engineering under constraints. Another pattern that we could see distinctively from an Indian speakers was a greater focus on implementation and constraints in their respective situations, contextual constraints, institutional negotiation, focus on building manufacturing ecosystems, frugal adaptation, and developmental challenges. So these were the types of patterns that we could see in the talks given by the Indian speakers. So combining this with the previous point is engineering and designing as a verb and a process. Here you can see distinctive priorities. Maybe in different geographies and institutional contexts, the priorities are slightly different. But when it comes to Indian context, the challenges of linking engineering with larger developmental issues and in highly resource constrained environments, that seems to be a pattern which is emerging, which distinguishes Indian context a little bit from the other global scenarios. Now comes the more network analysis based insights that we could gather by looking at the same data. So when we built a network of these 8 themes, we identified these 8 themes, and then, as I said, mapped the different talks to these 8 themes, and then came up with a clustering and looking at centrality and so on, different parameters. So I'll present that analysis in the next few slides. The first thing was to look at the clusters in this entire data. So when we had these 8 elements and relationships, we could clearly see 2 clusters in this. The first cluster largely relates to the foundational methods, like, for example, the focus on education, the design methods, the manufacturing ecosystems, the history and epistemology of engineering, and innovation and practice. So these came out as one cluster. And then the second cluster was sustainability, digital and AI, and institutions and policy. This is how the talks could be clustered. And I also given examples of some of the talks which fit under each of these categories. Like, for example, under education, we had talks where people started emphasizing why engineering pedagogy needs to be different. And clearly it is visible not only in India, but from across the world, these messages have been coming across in different talks. In design methods, we have had talks talking about the history of the Paul and Bates evolution of the entire design methodology of Paul and Bates, and similarly the Sue's axiomatic design and CK theory. So these were some of the very powerful talks which talked about the design theory and design methods and so on. Under systems and manufacturing, mostly the talks we had were about indigenization and largely in the public sector initiatives where, like, for example, the Vande Bharat, how ICF reinvented or came up with a new product line like Vande Bharat, and to shift from the earlier model of making coaches to actually building train sets. So that's a transformation that we could see. Similarly, Tejas was also discussed, how the entire Tejas evolution of Tejas happened in India. From a university perspective, the IIT Madras case study in terms of building a manufacturing ecosystem to support develop indigenous, or rather maturing domestic technologies to the international standards. So there was this talk by by Professor Ramesh Babu on the I think the grinding tools or something like that, one of the Indian companies, where they had worked with them to mature that technology to a world-class standard. Then we also had the talk on bark from Professor Ashok. So like this, there are, and most of these talks were related to the largely coming from the PSU context in India. And there were, of course, a few private sector talks as well. Then in terms of history and epistemology, we had talks going back into the history of engineering in India, the looking at the development of CMU, the design at CMU, and also leadership in an engineering education perspective from Israel. So these were some very interesting talks coming, looking very deep into what is engineering, what is knowledge creation in engineering, and so on. And then the innovation practice talks were mostly talks of university-led innovation, in the sense incubation oriented innovation, and those kind of talks we could see in the innovation practice area. What the left side also, the cluster one also suggests is the kind of changes which are happening, or at least the speakers pointing to the necessity for the nature of change in existing systems, whether it is education or existing industry, right? And rooted deeply in the historical knowledge base within this thing and the methods ecosystem. So this is the kind of pattern that we can see in this cluster. Now, when you move to the second cluster, this is where mostly the emerging issues are visible here. One is the sustainability as an emerging issue, digital and AI, which is again a global trend which is shaping the world, and also the development of institutions and policy to cope with these new challenges. So this is the kind of talks that are there under the cluster 2. So what we have further done is to analyze specifically the patterns in this network. So the first thing we could see was when we mapped this network and looked at what are the most central elements in this, the design methods came out as a very central element in all these discussions, which sort of indirectly suggests, of course, there is a bias because all these talks were oriented in that direction. But the data from this matrix or the network essentially shows why design is integral to many of these activities. As systems become more complex, the core competency actually shifts from knowing how an item works to knowing how to systematically navigate unknown spaces using structured processes. I think this is the key message coming out from this particular slide, and also the nature of design methods taking a central role in this entire set of themes. So, um, which is an important point to note in terms of what engineering might be, where engineering is probably moving towards. The next interpretation that we could see was elements like education, the design methods, and history and epistemology. They had very dense connections. So if you look at the density of connections between these, education, design methods, and epistemology or history, this density of connections is very high compared to the rest of the network. So one interpretation that one can derive from this is that as we move towards really look deeper integration between the design methods rooted in the epistemology and education, they are essentially enabling a different pedagogy towards learning. And there were also talks which showed how design can become an intermediary to the developing an entrepreneurial engineer. Design as a verb, design as a, not as a body of facts, but an active culture of engagement with the real world. So these perspectives come out from a strong synergy between these themes, which also means that future of engineering education, when we want to look at how we want to reinvent engineering education, then embedding the historical failures, socio-technical ethics, and cultural awareness alongside mathematics and programming becomes an important part. Now, this is a theme which we would have heard in many forums, and it is reasonably well understood, but still may not be practiced on the ground. The CREI talks again re-emphasize this point. So that is something we can see from this pattern here. Then there is a third interpretation that comes out is the strong synergy between these two elements which are at the center. One is the design methods and innovation practice. Now, these two appear to be kind of a bridge around which all these other nodes are hanging. What it also suggests is innovation management has to be design driven. Now, we may see innovation and design operating at different levels in organizational context or even in academic context. But what this model or this pattern suggests is the tighter integration between design and innovation management. The implications are that when you are in an organization, when we do or in an industry, product development and the innovation management, there is a lot more deeper coupling required in that. Even in an academic context, like we have this research versus commercialization debate, design can play an important role in bridging that gap between research and commercialization, and between learning and research, or learning or teaching and research. That is the pattern which this pattern essentially points to a deeper synergy which can emerge between learning and innovation, whether it is an academic environment or in an industrial environment, which to a large extent we can say that is fragmented in the current both the university ecosystem as well as the industrial environment. In the university ecosystem, you will see the debate of teaching versus research, and in industry it will be between R&D and operations, or new product development versus milking the existing revenue streams, and so on. So there is a split which is visible in both the contexts. Design can play an intermediary role to bridge this gap, and that is the message which can be extracted from a pattern like this. Next is the fourth pattern is when you look at these two elements, the sustainability and digital AI, they are part of a different cluster. It also suggests that future or what is emerging, a kind of synergy needs to happen between these two. So digital AI is not just for a commercial localized benefit within an organization, but should embrace the broader sustainability and social concerns. So that's the message which comes out from this, which means developments in artificial intelligence or data science and others need to be tightly coupled with how they can address the societal problems rather than seeing them in a very fragmented manner. So that is the other message which is implicitly coming from the talks, um, uh, from all these talks, and is visible in the pattern here. Now comes, okay, if we take these four interpretations in terms of looking at the centrality of design methods, the clustering of education methods and the epistemology related talks, and the deep connection between design methods and innovation practice, and the emerging interest in integrating sustainability and AI and so on. One can use this to start asking a question: what do we mean by what is expected from the future engineer, or what is that the kind of future engineer should be? And one conclusion that probably we can put forward here is that future belongs to neither the unreflective coder nor the detached philosopher. Future belongs to design-driven systemic practitioner, someone who uses formal design methods as a language to ensure that advanced technical power is always directed towards sustainable, ethically governed, and historically conscious human progress. So this is a messaging which can be extracted from the patterns that we have seen so far. Now comes the disconnect that we are also, or okay, let me just complete this slide and I'll come to that. So we did a comparison of what this pattern might suggest and how it differs from some of the existing models of engineering which have been proposed in the last 25 years. Starting with the Abbott's model, which came in the early 2000s. They talked about what the engineer of 2010 should be. Then you had the CDIO model, which is inspired by the MIT's model. And also in 2018, MIT brought out a report on state of engineering education, and they presented a certain view on what a future engineer might be. Now, what we have seen here is a slight subtle difference in these patterns. The first one is that Abbott's model was essentially building a competent problem solver, right? So an engineer expected to be a problem solver with a good knowledge base and so on. So that was the greater focus in the Abbott model. The CDIO model slightly pushed it towards adding a lot of interpersonal skills and kind of more practical problem solver kind of scenario. The MIT's model in 2018 essentially pushed engineers towards not only technically excellent, but interdisciplinary and entrepreneurial and socially aware. So that's the shift that the MIT model proposed. Now, what we see in this CREI talks is slightly moving the same needle further down, but it is more in terms of someone who can actually navigate a socio-material complexity, especially in contexts like India, where resources are constrained and the social and organizational structures may have their own limitations. So you need somebody who does not just talk saying, I know how to do things, but can he navigate that entire landscape to convince the stakeholders to make a difference? Both, whether it's an engineer or an industrial designer, uh, they cannot restrict themselves to saying, I am good at doing the how part, and deciding the what and the why is somebody else's job. They have to play an active role in shaping the why and the what. That's the message which comes out in terms of looking at the CREI talks. What is also shown here is the different implications of looking at a model like this, which means how learning happens, how knowledge creation happens, and what is the nature of graduate profile. All these elements also have subtle changes when you take a perspective like this. So this is in a way a sketch, I would say still a sketchy understanding coming from an interpretation of these 64 talks. We still need to debate and look at what is this really pointing to and how do we actually give more practical shape to these kind of ideas which are emerging. The next question was there was something which is also a problem which is worth looking into. Maybe this is for the future discussions in both CREI and in the wider forum. What we could see in this model is a disconnect between the two clusters, in the sense that when we talked about design methods and innovation practice, they were largely in a university context. But if you look at elements like sustainability, institutional policy, and digital AI, they are not connected very deeply with the history and epistemology of the engineering space. Which means even though history epistemology appears to be connected to education and design methods and so on, the absence of any deep linkages between this particular topic and the elements like sustainability and institutional policy and digital AI possibly suggests a disconnect where these questions of epistemology are not really entering the space where the developments around AI, institutional policy, and sustainability are being discussed. And this could be an avenue for further discussion or even identifying speakers who are trying to bridge this gap. Because this is critical for the future development of engineering and engineers. Because without having a deep debate and discussion on whether the current epistemology of engineering is it sufficient to deal with the kind of challenges which are emerging, or the kind of directions which are proposed in the CREI talks, how do these perspectives permeate the discussions on digital AI, innovation, institutional policy and sustainability is something which needs to be taken up going forward. So this is an area where we see a gap and possibly more discussions are required, or people who are working in those areas, maybe we also need to bring them into discussion to look at how these gaps can be bridged. Another gap which we also felt or see in this CREI talks is that we still don't have too much representation from the crafts and people who are actually doing hands-on work. Those kind of perspectives are still not very high. That may also tell a different story in terms of uh, how one might look at engineering in a very broader sense. So this is another point, and so based on this, we are presenting one proposition, which again, from a debate perspective, is if this is the kind of fragmentation we see, and from going back to the earlier sites, the kind of patterns or the directions that we are seeing in these talks, one thought is emerging where how do we look at professional education going forward? So one proposition that we will present in the next slide is that if you look at three professions that we are taking for discussion here, engineering, design, and management, as three tightly coupled professions which are involved in changing the socio-technical systems around us. Now, these three domains have largely grown as silos with different disciplinary basis, different pedagogy, different kinds of case studies. There has been a distinction in that. But there may be actually an opportunity to build a common foundation for these three. Where, for example, engineers, like many of the talks in this CREI were about how engineers can benefit by embracing design. But at the same time, managers also can benefit from embracing design. At the same time, designers can benefit from embracing elements of engineering and management, right? So there is possibly an opportunity for relooking at a new foundation for professional education, which has elements of engineering, design, and business built at the heart of it. And while they have their own respective specializations on top of that. So there is possibly some opportunity there. And that's the one possible direction one can look at, especially in countries like India, with the intent to implement NEP. And NEP talks about a multidisciplinary foundation for undergraduate students, irrespective of the branches that they come from. And to a large extent, what we are also seeing in the capacity building program on design and entrepreneurship is embedding elements of design and entrepreneurship into regular academic programs, whether it is somebody studying microbiology, or somebody studying sciences, or somebody studying some commerce and so on. There is an opportunity to revive these disciplines in a different way by creating that kind of common underlying platform. So based on that, this is a broader direction or a proposal for discussion that we can possibly look at in terms of how professional education could be reinvented in terms of creating a very strong design-centric foundation within these three streams. So that is the kind of summary that comes out from the this presentation. So I think this is the last slide that I've got. So I'll stop here for now. We will take up any questions and views that people may have. So thank you for listening.
Hopefully, people in the audience, even though we are a small one, I think we should debate. And from your own experience, it would be very nice to know what do you think of what has been presented, and also what you see as lack or augmentation of a current engineers you guys have hired or taught, or any of those along any of those dimensions? Of course, Sham, myself, and Sudhir may have some opinions, but we want to get some thoughts from you. It would be very nice if you could tell us from your side. Professor
Maybe we can
Ashok?
start with Ashok, sir.
Yeah, yeah. Can you hear us?
Sir,
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, I will say it was a fantastic analysis by Sudhir sir. And going through so many talks and arriving at certain classification and concluding it's a really mammoth task and which he did it nicely. Thank you for that, sir. Now, based on my experience, I will talk a little different in this context. Sudhir sir said the what should be the direction of future education.
Mm-hmm.
With the since new education policy is coming into force, and what is our observation that I would like to just share? Uh, uh, this particular program CBD, where we had a limited uh, scope in the particular colleges, and we had a pedagogy changes suggested based on certain ideas students proposed and faculty mentors nurtured and uh, uh, expert mentors like us guided them. So this kind of ideas absorbing in the system, existing system of education, I find it is very difficult in the college in the sense uh, there is a lot of resistance and what I call people look at what they are going to gain and what is financial benefit and how it is going to. Nobody thinks it is supposed to nurture the minds of the engineers for the future generation. So this kind of learning, it has to be incorporated in the regular learning system, learning by doing whatever you call it. Because this is running as a side program. Maybe it is the beginning of the session, beginning of this program, so it's fine for first 2 years or maybe few more years. But it has to be incorporated forcibly into the system. That's what I feel. Because whatever students they are benefiting out of this and faculty mentors who has taken a lot of interest in this, they have definitely changed their perspective and it is benefiting them. So I could see that. And another thing is institute has to be supportive and they will be supported if there are clear-cut guidelines from the top. So I think that has to be communicated or incorporated in the policy itself. Then only it is possible, and it is a fantastic. And some section of people, uh, professors and students, they are really enthusiastic and they want to learn that way only. But because of the limitation of the regular curriculum, they are forced to skip such things because marks are important for them. So it has to be incorporated in the regular system. That's what I want to say. Then only future education, that learning by doing and design design thinking can come into their actual practice. So that has to be seen, I think.
I would like either Dr. Vanita Soni or Dr. Hemalata to make their remarks, because some of you are coming from industry as well or industrial background. That would be very nice to hear as the students come to you from these institutions in a raw form. Who would like to go first?
May I, sir?
Certainly.
Yeah. So first of all, I am not a doctor. I am.
That's okay. Don't worry. Don't worry. It doesn't matter.
So
Uh-huh. Your opinions count. Yes, that's all that
Okay.
matters.
So thank
Mhm.
you for including me in this program. And it has been a wonderful experience because right from my work when I was in industry, like I was always enthusiastic about or rather excited to interact with the academia and come with a innovative solutions. That was I was always looking like. See, the first thing when we go to the any organization is that first 2 years they'll be conditioning our mind to the organization culture. Even I was put into design. I was even taught how you have to think about the design. What are the procedures you have to follow for the design and how it
Mhm.
has to be. Though it was all very good because it helped in standardization, it helped in production manufacturing. It taught us on the machinability or the what do you call makeability of a product. Like you cannot draw anything, how you are done. But after some time you see just an example of this three D printing. Now
Mm.
long are gone in which you don't have to have a machining tool to machine it. You just print it on the 3D and you okay. So the technology is changing, the outlook is changing, the economics is changing. Down the line, 10 years before, we could never think of a product only being produced by 3D printing. So what happens is, I think new production technologies, new way of manufacturing, and what is available should be exposed to the children. That is fundamentally how you can make a product, how you can do things, how and with that blending, we should we should make use of their innovative or tangential thinking. Is it not, sir? They may not. So we don't want a development of a condition thinking. Maybe that is where the great products have come when
Mm.
you challenge that. Okay, this is not the way I can do this. Somebody, a traditional manager may say no, it will never be done. If you see, I don't have to pick out examples. Any new innovations or disruptions have come only when the traditional way of whatever is being done is challenged and being done. But still, the knowledge of what is being done should be there on the background to take a challenging route. So that knowledge, that is the industry, has to be closely associated and the academia has to react. And the young minds, their knowledge and their way of thinking has to be roped in. So I am still not able to bridge that gap.
Mm. Mm.
That's the point I wanted to bring in. Yes, with this AI and everything, now people are telling you go to the fundamentals and you have to study fundamental engineering. Coding is gone. But sir, yesterday Jensen Huang, the NVIDIA,
Mhm.
my chief has told, who's telling this rubbish that coding is over? Coding is, it is going to be multifold. So
Mhm.
you don't know. I am not an expert in AI. I just read on all those things. But how we can come out with the exceptional or disruptive products or ideas or the to bring in solutions, to bring in the solutions for the society that will
Mm.
produce excellent products. So if CBD can be the anchor to to nudge at least that
Mm.
lecturers should be encouraged to have, okay, come out with products, come out with something new, come out, challenge the existing system. Then people like us will be very excited to work on. Like I was working in a machine tool industry, and I am, I feel very bad when the industry machine tool standards in India is still very low compared to the six-axis or multi-axis machining that is being
Mhm.
done by other countries. We can develop. Maybe that economics does not develop for the market, or that developing that machine may not make a business sense to that. But how they have machine, how they have come out, so that bridge, that gap used to always pain me. But that is only one side. But how can we bring in that tangential thinking, or the what do you call it? How do you define it, sir? Exponential thinking or divergent thinking to the traditional knowledge base to create new products. If CBD can guide us as to how to encourage the staff or the lecturers to do that, it will be of great help to me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Vanita Soni, you have some comments? It would be lovely to
Good
hear
evening,
from
sir.
you.
Good evening, sir. So all the
Go ahead.
interactive lectures are very informative and useful. So it also encourages to change our pedagogy so that we can focus on the practical solutions rather than focusing on the theoretical aspect alone. Nowadays, the children, they have to face more challenges and they need a solution which can be achieved only when we encourage them to find a logical solutions for their success. And through CBD, we are providing that platform, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Dr. Agarwal, would you like to make some comments? I'm not sure you were able to see the whole lecture.
I think I joined a little late, so might have missed
Yeah.
the.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Madam Hemlata and Dr. Soni. I think what you have brought out are very important points. I live in the US, but I'm going to ask a question anyway. How can we, to both of you and others as well, how can we bring this to the attention of the larger Indian educational community, including policymakers and others, to say, hey, look, you have national education, NEP, or whatever it is. How can we incorporate better ways of teaching, better ways of incentivizing faculty as well? As one of you pointed out, that's a big impediment. And Dr. Ashok pointed that out. So I think that would be a very good way for us to maybe even prepare something and present it to the policymaking community based on these lectures or our experiences. What do you think of that? Any comments? Yeah. Sham, if you want to make any comments.
Yeah, just to follow up on what just Sab said, it's while I'm an engineer, but I worked in management most of my life. And of course, we talk a great deal about incentives. But when it comes to academia, to professors, teachers, the incentives can go only so far, because a great deal of what value a good teacher brings to his or her students is not easily measurable. And without good measurement of what you bring to the table or to your students, the linking monetary incentives to highly imperfect measures can seem very arbitrary, and it becomes arbitrary and therefore unfair. So in academia, use of incentives, to especially monetary incentives, to promote behavior of faculty is a very tricky challenge. And to best of my knowledge, nobody has found a very good solution to it, except hope that you recruit people who are really interested in learning themselves and promoting learning of their students to the best of their ability, and that they would do so for in as a responsibility that is internalized by them, because external incentives become very difficult to administer in academic settings. Let me just stop here.
Yeah, so some structural elements, from a policy point of view, some structural changes are really required. It need not be monetary in the sense, like for example, a faculty taking an initiative to change something should have flexibility in terms of the number of the course load that he has got, right? So those kind of structural things can be brought in the present setup. It is feasible to implement that. So without really getting into a monetary type of model, there is still space to address some of these structural elements and at all levels. That those are the kinds of things one probably needs to look at.
Mhm.
And the second thing is what we also see is like in this talks itself, if you see, there are quite a few talks, but they're all like small islands of experimentation which are happening, and there is a lack of mechanism to take these small islands and connect them or integrate them or scale them, right? So that is another thing very visibly you will see. A lot of pockets where it has happened. Like for example, even if you take the Vande Bharat experiment and others, how much of that learning has spread into the academic ecosystem around the railways ecosystem, right? So it may be still localized. That learning is localized to certain parts of the certain institutions and some of this thing. So it is not really percolated in a wider manner. So that is something which we continue to see as a key gap. Small experiments, but they're all still in a fragmented state. And there is probably some mechanisms absent which can allow these connections to happen.
Essentially, what you're saying is that the diffusion mechanisms of learning are broken, if I may put it very harshly. I've heard this from my doctor friends also in India who say there is a lot of expertise distributed in India, but I don't know where to go for it, whether it is engineering expertise or medical expertise. So, really, what you are suggesting from a policy point of view is to create diffusion mechanisms that are very important, either through conferences or ways of bringing people together to have discussions about what they have done, both from industry, academia, and otherwise. I would include crafts, is something that would be very important in moving the policy of implementing such programs in a more orderly and systematic way. Is that a right characterization?
Yeah.
Mm.
Sir, I have a suggestion to make, sir. The lot
Please.
of industries like defense electronics or other, they are really putting certain things to be developed or certain solutions to be developed in their site. If
Mm-hmm.
CBD can take that, we are not doing anything. Like it is maybe automobiles, there are now some special solutions to be developed or technology. Like, the other day, the development of, engines for the
Mm-hmm.
aircraft engines.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain points in which there is a real bottleneck. Government is
Mm-hmm.
funding. It is not happening. So like that, can we not take some 10 or 12 of the topics and put it in a CBD and Yes, we would like you to work on that. So that, we forcefully give some orientation to the people who are involved in the CBD, and naturally related informations will flow in, and we may be developing. It is just to give that focus and a real output. Now we can take and say, okay, these are the real technical problem. Like, we are seeing recently, how we have gone back in the development of the fighter engines.
Mm-hmm.
We're still on the papers. So these are all real technical problems, and means the country is still backwards on that. Okay, why not we just put it as a token of, okay, see, hello, these are all the problems. Is any of the institute working on this? So you give some orientation on. Okay. Now there will be discussions on, can we have a talk on, some experts can come and say, okay, I have worked on this thing. These are all the challenges to be taken up. Okay, now anybody interested in, can they come and address it? Okay, if that is the case, let me try something else. It's not that the solution is that the France and US have developed the fighter engines. So it is not that it is impossible. Somebody has to nudge it and this thing. I'm sorry, sir, if I am not talking in what you're meaning. Like, addressing, instead of addressing a larger platform, why not we bring in some focus and some areas? Eventually, somebody may develop on something totally different. This is because one of the faculty specifically asked, Madam, when I go and ask the children, they are just telling, they don't know any idea to develop. So if I give them 5 or 10 topics, then they may say, no, this is the 11th topic I would like to work on. It is just giving an orientation for them to work. Children will think about that. Maybe 10 will not work, so they will say, okay, these are all the things. So like that, whether CBD can really push in some focused development, but it will definitely, my thinking is, once that platform comes, it will spread out to a larger area of development. And definitely on that specific topics, we can bring in technocrats on demand. Like suppose say, okay, we are working on it. We would like, then people can come and work on it. It's only an idea, sir. Maybe it is totally not aligned to what CBD is saying. I am still worried about that. Even Sudhir sir, I was asking, sir, next year, what are we going to do? That's the question always I
Yeah.
used to ask. But I would
No,
like to answer, I would like Sudhir sir's point and thought on this point at least. Thank you.
yeah. So this forum is not a CBD forum. So that is one point I want to clarify. This is a much wider forum looking at the issues. CBD as an initiative is trying to connect some of these dots, right? And there may be an opportunity to make it a little more specific when we go into the next phase. But the topic which you highlighted in terms of a lot of public sector units have been asked to put out components that they can indigenize. And they're all listed on their websites. And they are encouraging MSMEs to come forward and address them. Or like, for example, solenoid valve and these kind of things which go into aircraft. HAL and others have listed these things, right? And but they expect a company which has the skills to deliver this, and therefore MSME organizations are being targeted to come forward to manufacture some of these components, which can help in the indigenization process. Now, what we don't see there is an active involvement of any academic institution coming forward and saying, I'll work with this MSME to solve this problem. This is all public available information.
Exactly,
But
sir.
we don't see many cases of academic institutions actually stepping in and saying, we will take up this component and deliver it. Right. And so this is where it again comes down to what is a research interest of a faculty, what is really that they can take it up as a topic. Those dots don't seem to connect at many places. But so again, it is. Are there any mechanisms which can allow these collaborations to happen? Like, for example, in Tamil Nadu, there is a scheme which explicitly says that an MSME can work with a knowledge partner and approach the government for an innovation grant. So where essentially they are trying a problem of the MSME with a knowledge partner to solve that problem. So those kind of schemes are probably required at around this. Instead of saying I have this components which need to be indigenized and MSMEs come forward, if they include an element saying we will also give you a small grant for an academic institution to be part of this thing, so jointly it needs to be solved. So this is where the policy interventions probably also are required to enable these dots to connect. Otherwise, there will be, you will go and see any institution, you will find a few faculty doing some of this work, but they will all be in fragmented ways. Right? It is not coming together in a much bigger mass scale.
Rightly said, sir. For example, a particular faculty may develop a very high strength or high quality, whatever is the mechanical properties are required, material may be developed. Whether that material can serve this purpose or whether how it can be used, those things are not getting connected at all. The patent and the development and the research stops at that point. MSME will never know that that can be used to this. So
Yeah.
that's where, I always get, I wanted to nudge on that angle.
Yeah.
See, yes, sir.
No, there are some schemes. I came across some models like this in the US where the grant is given at two levels. The first level is to allow a set of institutions to conduct a series of workshops to interact with a wide group of industries to find common problems of interest. And the second level grant or support is given where once they decide on certain problems, then the industry and the government, there is a joint funding for that particular initiative. So this kind of exploratory grants where people can go network and find those connections, that is something which is not very visible in India. So that something like that could be a useful intervention which can allow some of these connections to emerge.
Sir, most of the institutions are deemed universities, so lecturers have got a lot of freedom to select the pedagogy and the subjects. So if some orientation or some thought, this is the area in which we have to develop, then they can bring in subjects to the students to do more on more studies or more work on these areas. That's my thought, sir.
Any other comments from others? I think a lot of things have been raised, and I feel that one thing we need to think about is through these lectures and other forum, should we, as a community, as a set of people who are involved in this, develop some kind of a policy document? Because there were people who came from India to US to talk to NSF, and when Panchanathan was the head of NSF, but a lot of NSF programs involve industry, academics in a very direct way. There is even something called MURI, Multi-University Research Initiative, where industries have to participate with multiple universities to come up with projects which are of interest to industry. I don't know, I'm sitting far away to know whether such programs have been brought into the Indian context. And similarly, in Europe, I know that especially places like Sweden, Netherlands, and Denmark, 80% of the projects I see in engineering and others have direct involvement with industry, both encouraged by government and even local governments and local communities. So this might be an area which needs to be explored, and possibly something that should be written in the bureaucratic and
Very
political
sweet.
establishment needs
Very
to
sweet.
pardon?
All right.
No.
Yeah. So that is something maybe is something which should come out of this forum, at least in the Indian context. I'm not worried about China, or China is doing this already in a big way. US and Europe are doing it, and I think it's time India also thought about how to create these networks in a more robust fashion. And I think your comments, Ms. Hemlata, was really important. And the question is, how do we bring awareness and move these ideas forward? Well, these lectures were part of that idea of expanding the discussion as well. And thank you very much for joining.
Yeah, one development definitely which is happening is in most of the research proposals today, there is an expectation that there is either a startup or an industry partner involved. So that is being expected out of all the research grants. So this may create some pressure for some of these linkages to start emerging. But also you have this ANRF, and it has a CEO, and they are also looking at some CSR collaborations to drive research. And for the industry also, they have given some incentives. If they are participating in research, they get some benefits and so on. But these are still very early days in terms of actually seeing the connections emerging on the ground. So it may take a much longer period for some of these things to manifest. But if there are some mechanisms by which people can accelerate this process, maybe those mechanisms we can point out, saying these are the kinds of things you can look. So anyway, we have come to the end of this talk.
Yeah.
So
thank you, Sudhir, for making this talk. And really, thank you, Dr. Soni and Ms. Hemalata, for participating in this. I hope we can take this message further, and we have some more lectures coming up. We are trying to organize a lecture for June 17th. There is one already on July 1st, right? Is that Zach? Yeah, that's by Dr. Zach Pertl, who used to work in NASA. He's an engineer philosopher. He's going to talk about what engineers know and how they know it based on Vincent T's book and other experiences. And we also have another one on July 17th, right? By Peter Childs, who is the director and founder of the design engineering program at Imperial College. So I hope you are able to join. Yeah, Sham?
You might mention that the time of those other talks will be the usual time and not this time. So just repeat that time, please.
Yeah, the time is Indian Standard Time, 6:30 p.m. as it was before. We were trying to juggle to see what is the right time for people to join. It looks like 6:30 more people join than this earlier time. So that's where we will go back to that time and will inform all of you accordingly.
And also, please encourage any of your colleagues or friends who may be interested in these lectures to join us, and we'll be glad to send them invitations if you send us their name and email.
Just to add to what Sham said, please ask your students also to join. I think one way we could promote this, when the students listen to these discussions, maybe they will push their professors to say, hey, help us. with managing these ideas or wanting to do certain ideas which we have come across. That might be very useful. Please do distribute it to students, which is something we have not done very well as of now. That would be very much appreciated. Thank you very much. And shall we close with that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank
And
you.
this
Thank you,
video
everyone.
also will be online.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please share it
Thank
with
you.
others. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, sir.